Hello, this is Lerone Coons, and this is Correctional Officers in the News, and today I will focus on an incident that happened in Georgia that resulted in 3 officers being arrested. But first, I will play the news broadcast of the story, and afterwards I will return and I will review the raw footage of the incident. So stay tuned.
Fired and charged. The 3 Camden County deputies accused of beating a jail inmate on camera are now behind bars themselves. And the GBI director says more arrests are possible. An attorney for the inmate says that this is the first step towards justice. 11 Live's John Sherrick has that story for us tonight.
3 sheriff's deputies who are seen on this Camden County jail security video severely beating and injuring an inmate, Jared Hobbs, back in September, are now themselves in jail and fired from their jobs. GBI Director Mike Register, who was asked last week by the Camden County District Attorney to conduct an independent investigation, says all he had to do was see the video of the deputies attacking Hobbs to decide jail is where the deputies belong.
As a citizen, my reaction was like anyone else. It shocked the conscience.
The deputies charged with 2 felonies each, battery and violation of their oath of office. According to their state post-employment records, Ryan Beagle, 24 years old, in law enforcement since May of 2019. Mason Garrick, 23 years old, in law enforcement since March of last year. Braxton Massey, 21 years old, in law enforcement since June of last year. Hobbs co-counsel Atlanta attorney Harry Daniels.
We knew this was coming.
Daniels is asking the U.S. Justice Department to investigate additional possible civil rights violations of inmates by other deputies at the Camden County Jail.
Okay, there are 3 videos that were released by the lawyers that are representing the inmate. The inmate's name is Jared Hobbs, and the video shows 3 different angles of the incident. So I'll be using these videos to walk through the incident in the hopes that by doing so, officers can learn from the mistakes that were made here. A little background on myself. I'm a retired New York City correction officer. I began my career in 1987, and throughout my career and throughout the years following, I have seen too many officers get involved in incidents like this. And in 1987, when I came on the job, I came out of the academy and was assigned to Rikers Island. There were officers then that were being fired and being arrested and being investigated by the Department of Justice for violating inmates' rights as it relates to use of force. So this is not a new problem. It's been going on for a long time. And I'm convinced that we as a correction community can do more to educate each other on how to prevent these types of incidents. But in order to do that, we have to be able to have an honest discussion about what we should and what we should not do. So I'm starting this discussion now. Now, I'm not doing this to embarrass the officers in the video or shame them or anything or dishonor the image of correction officers or anything like that. I know being a correction officer is a very difficult job, but maybe by reviewing incidents like these, we can help officers avoid some of the pitfalls of the job. So let's begin. Okay, now I'm going to start the video. This inmate that's in the frame now is not part of the incident. I guess he's just working, doing maintenance. Now, the inmate, whose name is Jared Hobbs, was arrested. Let me just pause it for a second. He was arrested for speeding, driving without a license, and being in possession of drugs. Now, he's from North Carolina, and he's on probation in North Carolina, and he's not supposed to leave the state, but he comes to Georgia, and that's where he's arrested now. He's in Camden County, Georgia. Now, this is the only video out of the 3 videos that I'm going to be reviewing that has sound. Now you're going to hear, now that banging noise is the inmate kicking the cell. So I'm going to play that because I was talking over it, but I'm going to play it again. And you see the officer come around the corner, then he hears the banging and he goes back towards the cells. Now the reason why this whole incident happened is because the inmate was kicking the cell. So now you're going to see 4 officers come to that area where the officers just returned to. Okay, so these 4 officers are going to the area. Okay, and I'm going to cut to the next angle And we're going to see these 4 officers join this officer, and they're going to go into the cell. But I'll cut it so you can see from inside of the cell, and this is before they opened the door. And so you see the inmate, I guess they're trying to talk to him, or the officer was trying to talk to him. And so the inmate, I guess, is getting his possessions. He has some stuff on the bench, some paper. And so the officer comes in and grabs him and tries to get control of him, stands him up, turns him against the wall. And I want to stop it right here. Now, as we see, the officer has his left arm, and then this officer has the right arm. So we're going to call this officer the A officer. And we're going to call this officer the B officer. And we're going to call this officer the C officer. Now, what happens is the inmate contracts or tenses up, and that causes the C officer to start striking the inmate. Now watch. Okay, I'm gonna pause it right there. Now I'm gonna back it up. Okay, we're gonna back it up to before any blows were thrown. And I just want to say this. Now, in an incident like this, when it first begins, I don't see anything wrong with this incident. Now, somebody that is not in the business might say, oh, well, he went in and he used too much force. No, I don't think so. The inmate was kicking the cell, so he's kind of belligerent already, and you don't know what he's going to do once you crack the cell. So it's reasonable to me that this officer tried to get control of him by pushing him down, and he's using soft hand techniques. He's not striking the inmate, and he tries to lift him and place him against the wall. He grabs his face, but I don't think that that's excessive use of force. He's still using soft hand techniques, and he's trying to get control of the inmate. Now, he stretches the inmate's arm out to try to, I guess, cuff him or, I don't know, put him against the wall, and the inmate resists. Now, this is normal. In a situation like this, a tense situation, you go in and you grab an inmate, he's going to resist. This is almost like a reflex. So he's not going to want to stretch his arms out. So it's not the time to start striking once you see that. It's just time to hold on and try to talk to him and let him know what you're trying to do. You tell him to put his hands against the wall or behind his back, but you don't have to strike him. But the officer that's in the powder blue, we're going to call him our C officer. He decides to strike the inmate in the back of the head. Now, we know due to our training that we are not supposed to strike an inmate in the back of the head, not unless it's a dire emergency like a life and death situation, because it's dangerous. You can give him a concussion, you can knock him out, you can do spinal damage, or you could kill a person by punching him in the back of the head. So right there, I think the officer is out of control. You know, he shouldn't have done that. But what happens as a result of him hitting the inmate, the officer that has his right arm, we're going to call him our B officer. He has trouble holding the inmate's arm, and the inmate punches the A officer in the face. So we see that right here. Let me see if I can get that. Right there, he punches the A officer in the face. Now this sets off the B officer and the A officer, and they start striking the inmate. Okay? And now it's totally out of control. We have a lot of shots being fired, and now you have, let's call him the D officer, comes in. And when I first saw him come into the frame, I thought he was gonna grab the officer, being that he, you know, put his hands on him. I thought he was gonna pull this officer out or pull him away from the inmate so they could start getting control of the incident, but he doesn't. He just comes in and just pushes the officer, and it causes, you know, it doesn't help, and it makes the situation even more intense, I think, because now there's 5 officers and an inmate in this small cell. So what happens next is that they finally get control of the inmate, and they pull him into the corridor, and I'm going to cut to the angle outside the cell, and you see them pulling him to the corridor, and you can see that the inmate is undressed. He only has a shirt on. He's half dressed. He doesn't have any pants on. He doesn't have any underwear on. He doesn't have anything on his feet. And the officers continue to strike him. They're striking him with their knees, and I think the officer at the top here, our B officer, is punching the inmate and striking him with his knees. Okay, so we'll see that when I start the video. And one thing else I want you to take notice of is there's a restraint here at the top of the video, right? And I just want you to look who's pushing the restraint chair into position. All right, as they're kneeing the inmate, another inmate is pushing the restraint chair in position. Now, the officers are now trying to get control of him. There's a bench there, so they're trying to lay him down on the bench. Now I'm switching to the next angle, or the first angle, where you can see down the corridor, and it has sound. So you can hear what's happening. Okay, so pretty much now the incident is pretty much over. They're trying to cuff the inmate, and the inmate has something in his hand. So I'm going to stop it right here. Due to some of the research I've done on this incident and some of the articles I've read, at this point they're trying to get the cuffs on him, and he has, I guess, the paper in his hand that we saw when he first, let me go back, when he first was, before the cell was open. I think he has these papers in his hands. I don't know what it is. I'm sure it's probably not contraband because the inmate seems like he's already been searched. His property has been taken. So the inmate has something in his hand at this point. And I want to play this audio here so you can hear it. The officer says to the inmate to open his hand, and the inmate is refusing to open his hand. And then the officer says, "I will break your hand if you don't open your hand." Now, I don't know whether I can cue this up to the exact location, but this is one of the things that the articles that I've read mention, that the officer threatened to break the inmate's hand. And I just wanted to comment on that, because when you have a use of force, you have to watch what you say, okay? In general, you have to watch what you say, but a lot of times you can get in trouble for what you say, because it kind of indicates your state of mind. So if you're having a use of force incident, it's better to tell the inmates to stop resisting or something along those lines. It's not good to say, "I'm going to break your hand, I'm going to break your face," and things like that, because that doesn't sound right when someone who's not in the business, or someone who's just viewing this thing cold, and they're not in the heat of battle, they view that and they hear that and they think that you're being excessive or abusive.
It's the paper, bro. I don't know. No. All you gotta do is wait. Dude, let it go. I am. I'm gonna let you. Open your goddamn head.
Okay, so that's pretty much the end of the incident. But you might have heard he said, "I'll break your GD hand," and that's one of the things that the lawyers and the media is picking up on. They eventually cuffed the inmate, put him in the restraint chair, and then they put him back into the cell. So that's pretty much the incident. Now, after seeing the video, like the GBI director, Georgia Bureau of Investigation director that we saw in the news broadcast said, this does shock the conscience. And I know some officers will say that they don't care about the inmate and he deserved it or whatever, but our job as correction officers is care, custody, and control. So it's all right to care about the inmate. I want to tell the young officers that it's all right to care. And as a matter of fact, we're supposed to care. It's part of our job. So in the heat of battle, we can't know how this looks. You know, these use of force incidents look. But when there's a video like in this case, we see that this looks bad. And the jury is going to see this. And they're going to see a half-dressed man that is about 5'6" and about 150 pounds, and with orange flip-flops on, being punched and manhandled by 5 correction officers. And why? What's the rationale? Because he was kicking a steel door. He was kicking the cell door. Now, that's not a good look at all. This incident lasted about 1 minute and 30 seconds, less than 1 minute and 30 seconds. And it has changed the lives of these officers forever. Now, do you think that the A and B officer would have been in this situation had it not been for the C officer punching the inmate? Would they now be facing charges? Probably not. You have to think about this, and you have to know who you're working with. And if you see an officer that shows signs of being overly aggressive, then you have to talk to him. Tell him he's got to control himself, or he's going to get all of y'all in trouble. This is what is considered an anticipated use of force, not an imminent use of force. In an anticipated use of force, you have time to plan. You have the time to plan what you're going to do. The inmate is in a cell. He's not going anywhere. You have time to get the riot shield, suit up in riot gear. You can plan who's going to secure his right arm, who's going to secure his left arm, who's responsible for securing his right leg, his left leg. They didn't appear to have a plan here. You can plan whether or not you're going to cuff them in the cell or you're going to extract them from the cell and cuff them in the hallway and place them in a restraint chair. When you have a plan, there's a less chance of injury to yourself and the inmate. And when the inmate sees that you're organized, he'll offer, or usually will offer, less resistance. Now, imagine being in these officers' shoes. Now, these guys are young. Imagine having to explain to your parents or girlfriend or wife that you were fired, and then them seeing this video. You know, now you're not able to pay your rent, you can't pay your car note, you can't pay your kids' tuition, you know, you older officers, you know, you're unemployed. And any money you have saved has to go towards paying an attorney to defend you against felony charges, you know. And so what are the prospects for these officers in the future? Okay, they're considered innocent until proven guilty, but what if they are found guilty? They may go to prison, but even if they don't go to prison, they will be convicted felons. And the job prospects for convicted felons is not very good. And they will never be able to work in law enforcement again because now they have a history. And let's not forget about the civil lawsuit. The inmates' lawyers have filed a civil lawsuit as well. And yes, they will sue the Camden County Sheriff's Department, but they will also sue each individual that's involved in this incident individually. And since these officers have already been fired by the county, the county probably will not indemnify these officers, meaning the county will not pick up the tab for the officers' portion of the judgment, because the county will say that these officers were acting outside of the scope of their employment and they weren't trained to do what they did. So let's put a number on this. Let's say $50,000. Let's say the inmate wins a $50,000 judgment against each officer. That means that if or when these officers get a job, a portion of their paycheck will be garnished for however many years or decades until the debt is satisfied. So imagine having to pay an inmate for the next 10 to 20 years because of a bad use of force incident that lasted less than 1 minute and 30 seconds. Don't let this happen to you. The 2 officers that grabbed his wrists probably intended to take the inmate out using reasonable, justifiable force, but that all went to hell when the C officer lost his composure. Now they are involved in this mess, and the 2 officers that didn't get charged may not be out of the woods because the GBI director said that only the 3 officers were charged for now. And the inmates' lawyers are calling for the Department of Justice investigation, and we don't know where that's going to lead. I know this is a very difficult job, and this is a difficult subject. But at the end of the day, we are all adults. Correction doesn't hire children. And we are responsible for our actions. And if you are one of these overly aggressive officers, don't believe for a minute that the officers that you're working with will risk losing their livelihoods and their freedom to cover for you. When it gets serious like this, they won't. They will flip on you and tell exactly what you did. I've seen it. And remember, cameras are everywhere now. In the walls, in the ceilings. Inmates have smuggled in cell phones, and the departments are starting to make correction officers wear body cams. Remember, thine own ass is sacred. So CYA, which means cover your ass. Keep your nose clean. I know some of you officers may have a problem with what I've said here, but that's perfectly okay. I'm cool with that. I welcome debate and I respect different points of view. That's how we learn. So if you like this video, share it and show it to your colleagues. Subscribe to the channel. And until next time, as always, peace and stay safe.